Hello, welcome. Welcome to the Master Talk of Philippe Parreno. I'm Edwin Carlos. I'm one of the programmers in the festival team, responsible for frameworks, among other things, and that's a scheme we started last year to invite people we really admire, people at the top of their game, to come and make something specific or to step out of the comfort zone and try something different, and we try to facilitate that, make that possible for them. I'm very happy to be introducing here because in 2001 or 2, I was at the Musée de l'Art Moderne in Paris, where there was a retrospective of Philippe Parreno, and I still recall how I was walking through that space and how the space was timed and guided me or allowed me to float in a museum in a very particular way. And Philippe has been reinventing retrospectives since then. I think he's one of the most original artists to deal with his own oeuvre. And the idea he proposed to revisit his film work has delivered, I think, a beautiful film. And this is kind of a dream come true for me. So I'm very, very happy that he's here, that he's created with lots of generosity, beautiful new work. And that's also due to Andrea Lissoni, who's going to do the talk this afternoon, the conversation with Philippe, because he was a key figure also in this coming into being. Andrea has worked numerous occasions with Philippe. He understands his mind, perhaps. Let's see about that. Please welcome Andrea Lissoni and Philippe Parreno.
Thank you. Oops. You leave your microphone. Wow. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Edwin, for the beautiful introduction. I'm definitely not sure I understand my mind, so I don't pretend to understand the mind of Philippe, but still, we can try. And we can try to do what we often happen to do, which is to twist a little bit the format, and what Philippe does since so long, which is actually looking ahead and twisting the context. So we thought that instead of speaking of the film that we hope you all saw, it would have been very interesting to invite one key character of the film on stage. So I leave you to introduce him.
No, because Michael Rudy is here, so he's going to come to play at 2 o'clock. Nice if you can come to say a few words. Thanks.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Michael Rudy, classical pianist and collaborator Philippe in this wonderful project. I will stay just a few minutes because at 2 o'clock I'm going for screening. And just to say how lucky I am to participate in such a project. And my part of this, it's kind of musical comment of works of Philippe, which is kind of intimate diary of his it's a very poetical journey, and music, which is art of time, deal with same kind of problem that visual art, which is art of space, but Philippe is searching for time element in this, and music, of course, it's good component for bring something innovative, new, and I don't know.
So we met. I can say a few words about the way we met.
Yeah.
I was introduced to Michael by Alex Putz, who at the time was running the Manchester Festival of World Premiere, who now moved to direct the Shed, New York. And I was looking for. There was two things that, two reasons why we met. The first was that I was working on the exhibition at the time called Postman Time, where we had with Antoine Chobris this idea to bring 20 artists in an exhibition format, but the exhibition will not be occupying a space, but a time frame. So Postman Time came from the text I wrote in '92, called Postman Time, where Postman Time means two things in French, facteur temps, postman being the postman, like it is in English, but also meaning factor. like the mathematical operation. So, and the text was all about this idea that who is in charge at the time of the visibility of an artwork. And even for a painting, we say painting is eternal, or a sculpture in bronze, yet any object of art is linked to its to an exhibition apparatus, or that will dictate its appearance and its moment of disappearance. So I saw in the text, I was saying the artist, in a way, it's ironic that the artists are in charge of spatial problem, or in fact they should be more inclined to think about the time of the work, at the time their work operates. So the idea was to do an exhibition where every artist would choose the time of appearance of the work. So some artists, like Kuyunga, decided to do a work that only appeared for a minute. Pierre Rubig did a piece that lasted for 15 minutes, and the extreme was to Matthew Barney, who did something that lasted for 3 hours or something. So the time was in the hand of the artist, so I was looking for, because it was operatic in a way, I was looking for a way maybe to apply music in it and to see how that all these scenes or events could come together in a form of in an operatic way. So I was looking for music or soundtrack, or Alex mentioned Michael, who's not only a virtuosis but also has a mind for visual art, because he's been dealing with that for a while now. So we had a talk about that, and you play Petrushka, and so it was to me, and I was struck by it. And then nothing happened we didn't choose to play any music, because some artists also use music into their own performative elements, so we didn't. And but after, I remember the Petrushka piece that you play for me, which I think is the only one able to do that. Yeah. And I was working at the time on an exhibition at the Palais Tokyo in Paris. And for the first time, I was trying to see how all these different rooms, it's quite a large space, and I wanted to link all these events, or all this momentum of apparition of my work within a more general kind of perspective, a time protocol. And normally when you pop up events in an exhibition space, or you use what Boviela defined being the time code. You run a time code, which is basically a white noise on which you hang all the elements. So you go in, out, in, out, in, out. And for this show, I thought, what if I make the time code audible? So, and that came, and then I came back from, so I say maybe Petrushka should be the lead for all the event in the show to hang on to.
And the loop was exactly the timing of Petrushka.
Exactly. So then he went all back together. So we worked together for this, and then after we did a show in. I did a
crazy idea to do it in live.
Yeah, and we decided to do it live in New York at the Armory, where Michael was kind enough to come and play every day for
2 months.
2 months.
But also with several other piano, disclavier piano, when I recorded the things for 3 or 4 pianos, and sometimes discussed with dialogue with the piano, which was 100 meters farther, and it was it was like a giant.
Armory is not an exhibition, a museum space. It's more like a large plateau, and
10,000 square meters.
Yeah, and I decided to do something which is in between an exhibition space and something else, which will be like not a modern space where you build spaces, white spaces for dead stuff, and that black boxes for moving elements. And I thought the Armory can actually be white and black at the same time. So it became sort of like a park where people will come in and spend a lot of time hanging around and waiting for something else to come. And so people will hang out there for a couple of hours. So it makes sense in a way that from time to time Michael will decide to come up and play a score of a film or a concerto by itself. So it was kind of like open. There was no pre-recorded program. It was left to Mikhail, but also to some other characters to decide the protocol of appearance of the work. And so that was the second time. And then the third time was with Andrea Lissoni when I did a show in Milan.
Yeah. And actually, very soon, I suspect you have to leave. I'm sorry to bring back the time and space, but perhaps it's interesting to share what did you actually do here? How do you interact? How do you work on
this work
film?
of Philippe is very special because it's a kind of result of several decades of his work. And it's editing of, for me, it's like a diary, a poetic journey. And well, I try to just communicate dialogue with his films, and using the music, which, in my opinion, suits to Philippe's aesthetics. For example, there are works of Alexander Scriabin, his late music, John Cage, Morton Feldman, wonderful piece which you very rarely can hear, Palais de Marie, which lasts about 20 minutes. There are some music of Leos Janacek, music of Ligeti, and all this music is rarely, but also some music of Bach. And it's in film, it's made like chapters. In each chapter there are flowers which announce next part. And each time there is the music for, like music for generique and
credit.
And I think the way that, because it's a live performance, it gives some urgency to. You don't know what you really see. It's a film or it's a performance. It's something in between and something new, and it's an experience. And for me, it's an experience because I'm completely immersed in all this beauty of film. And this dialogue brings something. It's not a piano which accompanied film. It's not a film. It's everything together. It's something new which appears.
But what happened is that Mikhail decided. We decided by talking together about the film while he was cutting it. He decided also. He suggests the music.
Yeah,
so
but I bring a lot of different things, and you choose what really.
Well, we talked about Scriabin for a while because Scriabin wrote this beautiful piece called Guirlande, which is an endless piece of piano, which is kind of like stunning, you know, written in like 1915, yeah. And so this, for example, for me was kind of like, because I never heard about it, you know. I mean, I never heard about this piece of music
but
in
most of this
1915, written to be played endlessly, which is quite something. So we talked about using that for a while, and then he came out naturally when he said we can play it on Flowers, because Flowers is also an endless film. So he came out of as everything I do in my work by in conversation with Mikhail. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm very, very sorry that I have to go because in 10 minutes I have to
play.
But I really invite you to visit because it's a wonderful film which made Philippe.
Thank you.
And I'm very, very proud to be here and very happy to be in this prestigious place. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Mikhail.
Well, and regardless of, so we watched the event, the film, or not, one other clear, alive figure beyond the film that we all think is alive is the Dalang, is a person that introduces the film. So perhaps it's interesting to speak about that and where does it come from and the reason why you wanted him to be there in that way.
It came from It came. We talked about it when we worked at the Tate on the Tate project together. But I think it came before. I think it came when we did the when I did the armory, and precisely I was trying to find a way not to put, since I deal with artworks in time, trying to find a protocol which is not decided by me, so to speak, but decided by some other form. And at some point I thought, what if we have a puppeteer, a set of puppeteers? We decide what to play next, and in a way convey by doing so the attention, the floating attention of public, which is not a public yet until the event occur. No, so I was kind of attached by this kind of like dialectical problem, and I thought about the Dalong, because the Dalong is a figure that can at the same time animate characters that come from a distant past and make their voices and so incarnate them and produce a sort of like proto-form of cinema, but at the same time also conduct the orchestra made of the gamelan. And the gamelan is basically one instrument but played by 20 people. So these two notions of the Dalong and the gamelan came back into the conversation we had as a way to hang on to another notion, a pre-modern notion of displaying an object in time. And so at Tate we thought about doing, working with Dalongs, and then it didn't happen. But in place, the show was run by Yeast. Why not?
Yeah.
I don't remember why the Yeast came in, but then the Dalong was sort of forgotten. And then and then I split up, but then I thought it would be. I never met one, so I thought I asked Edwin to see if he can try to work with somebody and I had a good time asking a lot of questions about the technique and the art.
Yeah, well, maybe I can try to refrain without spoiling too much. So if you happen to see the film, if you already saw the film, someone at the Lang will, basically like a conductor with a tuning fork, produce a vibration. And that vibration is what makes the event alive, I would say. And in this case, he's not controlling the event or the order of the event, but he's saying something that triggers your feeling, I would say. And what he says is, we all move to time. And then he starts, and he changes completely, breaks, I think, the suspension of disbelief, and it starts doing something which is very deep and very profound. So to some extent, you have two, let's say, early cinema, still alive elements within the experience of the film. One is the piano player, and the other one is the puppet master or the conductor of the shadow theater that tunes the fork, so it gives a sense to the whole experience. And as usual, Philippe, when working on a project, whether at Tate or wherever, is incredibly generous. Something will need to happen, but it doesn't happen for some reason. That element will appear somewhere else. And that's the reason, I would say, perhaps, why we all move to time and something will go back. And the reason why this film is not a retrospective, but is a perspective on his film, on his work, I would say. Something incredible that happens in the film that has to do also with a sort of out of date but still very contemporary element is the presence of 3D and the presence of titles in 3D. So maybe it's interesting to say something about that and how did you get to the point of choosing this specific form of engagement with the audience? Because again, if you had the experience, you realize that they are in space.
Yeah,
they're not in time. Only.
The 3D, I thought it was quite funny to well, there's a film that justifies the 3D. Can talk about that later. But and the credits are more the decorative aspect of it, but it engaged people to wear glasses while watching a movie, which I thought, no, it's more like a providing a sort of a reading experience, rather than to be immersive. When you read, I used to wear glasses to read, so I thought that would be a funny thing to do, just to wear glasses to watch a movie. And but that, and also another thing that also amused me was the fact that then the film in itself will be a 2D picture, but within a 3-dimension diegetic space. And I thought that quite ironic too. So, but the 3D, of course, functioned really well as a 3D display feature for the film called Anywhere Out of the World, which I did some years ago. It was a project I started to do with Pierre Huyghe at the time, and where we bought a manga character from a market, a Japanese market, and after trying to work around with the character and trying to provide to the character who was no quality a story. The story was basically a story, a real story was the fact that the character will eventually have on her own copyright and then be free and set free. So the idea was to create around this character that then became a sign, a collectivity who believes that the fictional character can be dependent from humans. No? So we did a legal loophole and produced an association that owns their own right, but the association is run by the fictional character, so nobody can touch anymore. That was the original project. And so because after a while, that was happened in 2000 something, and when I started to do this exhibition, and I projected the film was really low quality picture, because it was made in Betacam, and I just wanted to make let's start like that, upgraded version of it, restoration. And so instead, of course, of restoring the work, I decided to make a new one out of it. But then, because I can't really use a picture no more, so how can I restore the film without making a new film? So I did a new version of it in 3D, but exactly the same one. And I couldn't find the same person who did the text to the first film, so I didn't change the word, but find somebody else who say exactly the same words, but because he's a different person, she said more slowly. So the film were longer than the first one. And then I start to be amused by the idea that you can have on one side of your brain the old version, and a new side of your brain, and the other side of your brain the new version. So you decide whether you close one eye or the other to see one film or the other. And I thought that was quite funny.
And it actually works incredibly well. You are obliged to adjust, so you are obliged to really take a position, a posture within a given fixed chair situation. And then when the figure, the character takes shape, becomes tri-dimensional, it starts also to somehow glitch. Now there are moments of glitch, and this is completely unexpected and makes the experience of that film so alive.
In your brain, sort of,
yes.
these things that because your brain can cope with two events happening at the same time, and so you start to go like that, and then it becomes trouble or traumatic for. But I think it's a good way to also. It's a good way. Another way to deal with the fact that things are never done yet, completely, and I'm dealing, since I'm working really with digital stuff, and they are never completed because they still can be retouched over and over. There was a classic thing of the painter going back to the Louvre to retouch the painting. So it's a matter that can be constantly changed or morphed, and in my work I do that quite often.
Yeah.
So I change the work, and when I change a film, then I have like a 0.1 and then 2.0 version and then 3.0 version, and I get lost into the different versions, because the version that I do change according to the situation in which they occur. So in an exhibition space, I will change the invisible boy a couple of times to somehow not fit, but to produce another form of to link its appearance to something else that will come after, or something else that came before. So there are elements that produce, as I said before, an attention. Lyotard was talking about quoting this expression of floating attention from the Freudian text, but I love this idea that something is there, floats, and then when a form occurs, your attention is, to take it, and then a public is formed, and then I think for me that's a definition of an object, and so the séance that we do here at Rotterdam is an attempt to in a way, to go back to a problematic and evil pact that was done in the late 19th century, when somehow it's nice to add a bit of tension and drama into the moment in history where things decide to go to fork, and so the moment when we actually did exhibition about the sink of the Titanic, and we did exhibition about water, where people will experience these great and weird things of like going and swimming to the water, So there will the creation of swimming pool, where they definitely called it being an exhibition of water. So exhibition were not at the beginning a way to display objects that we may want to get or buy, but it was a way also to present something else. It can be an idea, or it can be an event, and somehow cinema came on and decided to make a little evil pact I'm talking about, where they said, okay, I am going to take care of display of objects, exhibition said, and cinema will tell stories. When in fact it would have been the way around, we could have said cinema presenting objects, and still carry on with the ideas that we can actually tell stories in exhibition space. So what I'm in a way doing that not in a theoretical form, but much more in a sensitive way, an attempt to go back to that kind of like moment where people talked about séance, which is a troubling zone, kind of something which is more trembling than the definition of what we know what we're going to see, because we define the context in which something that we expect going to come, but to be more open to something less defined and less also authoritarian. That maybe I keep kind of like doing exhibition, because in a way for me an exhibition is a non-authoritarian way of producing forms. There's never a beginning, never a end. And we're not forced to sit and eat chewing gum while you watch something. And the person in front of you is never somebody that you want to chop the head off because you can't read the subtitles. The person in front of you in exhibition space is somebody who knows more because he came here in time, he was before you. And so all these things are kind of like still lovely ideas, I think. I mean, you think too, because you keep.
No. I think that let's. I mean, everything is very abstract, but we can bring it to back to never back to reality, but back to the space we are sharing now, the time we are sharing now. So, to some extent, Philippe had a body of work of more than 40 films, and some of them are here. And they appear under a completely new shape, even though some of the single films they look like as they were made. It was incredibly interesting to witness the progress of how do you make a survey of your own work, and this process becoming, of course, a film. And the film taking the shape Philippe was describing, even though when it begins, and Michael left, As soon as you're inside, you are in front of a strange form that becomes alive, pulls towards you. Sometimes you really don't know who is thinking, whether the cinema itself or yourself. The screen starts vibrating, and it's quite incredible. It doesn't vibrate because there's a force, but because the way images were shot produce this sort of vibration. So you are really in a sort of suspended space, and you navigate it as you happen or as you want. So, but this allows me to ask, perhaps, how did you navigate your own work? Because you know it, some know, some, maybe few people in the audience do know it, but most of the people don't. So how do you decide to navigate and to produce something that was important and interesting for the audience?
I worked a bit like when I will do, in fact, I did, when I was talking about the 3D glasses, that because I'm a bit perverse, you know, when I do an exhibition, I try to bring in time into a space, and when I'm invited to do something in the cinema, I do the way around. I bring space into it. And so the way I did it for here was the same way. We're choosing the. I started to work like 2 years ago on it. I mean, as a sort of a glimpse of an idea to say, you know what, maybe a space to show film, to do a retrospective of a film would be maybe a film. It would be a film of film rather than to have one screen next to another. Does it make sense? So I say maybe we could try to bring them together. And so, but I didn't know how to start, and I didn't want to start by, you know, by doing the way you do it in a retrospective. You start by year 1, and then you go to year you're dead or something. But doing by motif, and to see how the motif can lead to something else, you know. So I started, I don't know how we came with the idea of, I only went at the beginning, but at the end, what in the middle, it changed position in the editing room. And then finally decided to come at the beginning for this reason of like using the glasses. And then Marilyn followed because it's so, you know, it's a journey through time. So we start in 62, then move on to 64 and therefore. So going through sort of so that it's not only my journey, it's also a journey of a moment of a bracket of history. And so it was organized by, not in a chronological order, but not in a chronology of my life, but a chronology of the topic, or the say that, or the film, you know, what the film address. So that's how it was. But then, of course, I broke it a little bit at the end. Same rule that I.
If one watches the film, somehow she is confronted to 3 women. It's somehow a character of 3, a portrait of 3 women. One is Marilyn. Yeah, more than 3. One is Marilyn, one is Anne-Lee, one is Leanne, and perhaps another one.
There's a ventriloquist.
And then there is a ventriloquist that you don't really see, but you hear her voice. So it's a very strange portrait of some female character.
That's something that came out of this. Yeah, I didn't see that before. I mean, I knew, of course, vaguely that there was something about some woman in my work, but I knew there was some flowers too, and it seems to be coming out. But I'm surprised because each time it comes, it's sort of like it's not there really. But there is a sort of somebody would, well, at the beginning, and he says, no, it's all about, it's a problem of incarnation. Like literally, how a picture can incarnate something else than itself, you know. And Marilyn is all about that because it's an attempt to do I mean, it was literally a séance. Before shooting, we did bring a spooky clairvoyant that did that went to all the technical team and talked to them. It was really spooky with a little blonde girl running around and senses, and it was really strange. And then we started to shoot. So it was an idea to bring to bring back an image that was killed by itself, you know. Or the first time, to put it differently, it was the first time a human was killed by an image, because you could say that Marilyn was killed by her own image. And I was interested by that and to see how this image could come back again, not the real one, not Marilyn Monroe, but the character Marilyn Monroe come back again. So what we did to bring back the image was to use a technique developed with VRCAM to reconstruct the voice of Marilyn Monroe, and then we used, there was a book came out at the time, so diary that came out when I started shooting. So we had the handwriting of Marilyn Monroe, and we analyzed with a lab in Germany the handwriting of Marilyn Monroe. And then we said, well, the camera will be a high, so in a way, it will become a biometric portrait. If you can replicate the voice of somebody and the eyes of somebody and the handwriting of somebody, you are basically somebody, no? And so we did that, and so we played the voice of Marilyn. We described the set, and so we were filming what the voice was saying. So it's kind of like a trap, a deadly trap, and but a phantasmagoria séance. And that's so that's definitely about that, kind of like an attempt for reincarnation that will never occur because it's impossible, of course. And then there's Liane with it was a film that I shot, Invisible Boy, where it was a story about. I shot Invisible Boy. How do I put it? It's a long story. We have another 20 minutes. When I did Zidane, the portrait of Zidane with Douglas Gordon, which was the first time we did a feature film. The feature film was Zidane was an attempt to do a portrait, no? A portrait in cinema. So again, because we're a bit perverse, I changed it the way around. No, I never would dare to make a portrait in an art space or museum, but we can do it in the cinema. And the idea was to say, what if we shoot one face for an hour and a half, and then so by looking at somebody for so long, you know, having sort of strange kind of relationship with the character. And we decide, because an hour and a half of the duration of the film is 90 minutes of a football game, and also because Douglas and I were at the same time, but in different places, him in Glasgow and me in Grenoble, saw the same football game, and which was at the time Saint-Etienne against Bayern Munich. And we were frustrated by the black and white color TV that we had, and the more closer we will get to the play you wanted to see, the less information we had, because we had just like big, lack of definition given by the standard of the broadcasting system at the time. So we thought, what if we don't shoot a factual game, and follow what the board tells you, but only one person playing the game. And that was the idea of the portrait. So, and why I'm saying that? Oh yeah, Invisible Boy. And then, so we did this portrait. And then after this portrait, I thought I like to make another portrait, but then of somebody else that will be exactly the opposite of Zidane, somebody with no picture or no identity. And so it was planned or meant to be feature film. And but then I didn't do it because I was bored about the idea. I don't know. I didn't find the right way to do it. And but I screened 10 minutes of the film. It was a bit long at the time. At another film festival, the second time and part of it, the third time, Cannes for Zidane, and then Locarno. It was screened in Locarno, and it was a portrait of somebody, Invisible Boy, because that's a name Chinese illegals say about themselves. That they don't have any head because they don't have any passport, and so they're invisibles. And so we found an invisible little man. We found in fact 3. And in case one didn't show up the day after, it was a bit strange. So we did 3 films with the same character. It's the same character playing the same thing, 3 little boys. And after that, while I was working on this feature film project, I wanted to shoot then the mother of the little guy, who happened to be a prostitute. So then came the idea of Liane that was done later. So it's also a character that doesn't have any that can express or have an image, a public image, because she's hiding. And yet, unlike Marilyn, she has also to deal with her body, and which is in a complicated, difficult term. So that's interesting, to follow up my chain of thought. And the last one is a voice of a ventriloquist I work with, Nina Conti. It's a British ventriloquist. There's not a lot of women doing this performative act. And when I made this film about non-human things, as we say today, I questioned the problem of the voiceover, and I thought it would be very funny to have a voiceover of a ventriloquist. So I asked her to say the text without opening her mouth, looking at the picture. So in a way, the picture becomes a puppet of a ventriloquist act. There was a famous ventriloquist back in the 20s, famous on radio, which is French, because he was a guy talking to a puppet, and it became a really fantastic duo in the British broadcasting radio. So I thought about that, that the picture will have the voice, will be the puppet of his ventriloquist. And by doing so, because the text is complicated, and as I know now, that in the wordings of the text of ventriloquist, he has tried to avoid the R and the P and the T, because they're hard to say without. And of course, I put a lot of them in it. So she struggled to read the text. So the text have a tension to spell it out, because it's just complicated technically to do that. And so then that you have the last, so that's this woman that animate the picture. So it's always a relation between both, I guess. No, one side of a picture and one side a voice of a woman.
The film, the non-human character that Philippe was now describing is the cuttlefish. So if you saw the film, there is a cuttlefish appearing at some stage and towards the end, and his environment, or perhaps his environment, and there is a voice over or around that could be the voice of the cuttlefish, but also not. But what is interesting on the point of view of the process that I could witness, this film was, let's say, reviewed for the Turbine Hall Commission in 2016, and throughout 6 months changed shape many times, was re-edited, represented, will appear in different places. And when the shooting was made, the ventriloquist, Nina Conti, Philippe was mentioning, was of course shot. So she was on stage, she was on a sort of specific environment, and she was there as a character as she was having a conversation with the cuttlefish, and then she was somehow transformed in a ghost, and her voice only was there and is still there. So this perhaps helps to navigate not a mind but a way of thinking that then triggers a way of making film, that the way Philippe works, and a way of making exhibition and objects that are not objects but are experiences, I would say. The intervention in the cinema is quite subtle. There are not only forms that take shape, but also and the dalang and the piano player, but also micro gesture on the seats that you might notice or might not. And maybe we should say anything because it's interesting.
Okay. Well, I thought since it's a proscenium stage, and we have, I thought why not making a magical? I thought of a magical act, and I thought let me make a magical act. So I wrote a sigil. Sigil. It's sigil. It's white magic. I do that from time to time. I love magic. Magic is a way. It's not magic that I'm making. Although there is a magician in the film now, I don't make disappear the white rabbit, but I do sigils because it's a way to articulate when you disparate an idea and to cast a spell of this idea. To spell that Alan Moore is to say, so it's to name something. So that's the definition of the spell. So filmmaker, an artist, is a shaman in a way, but less successful than McDonald's, because you see the aim of McDonald's, you're like, I'm starving, or not, or have issues with environmental issues, but you still react to the sign, to the sigil. So they're quite strong shamanic forces. So in a small cinema, I can try to compete with pâté sign by making my own sign. So it's a spell.
One of the
A good one.
No,
I don't do dark magic.
It's very good, very beautiful also, because perhaps knowing your practice, one would expect the lights getting on and off, or something affecting the perception differently related to the apparatus, the cinema, that actually you went for the more subtle but also unexplored device, which is just engaging with the place we are sitting into the cinema. Perhaps it's interesting to go back and to skip completely the history of cinema and ignoring it, and think about the cinema as an apparatus, the first time as a place. First time in my life I thought the cinema has a specific characteristic, which is being a safe place. Was 2 days ago when I could go to the premiere of Philippe. Very often in the rhetoric of museums we say the museum is a safe place. It's safe because it's safe from a point of view, and it's also welcoming and open to any kind of audience with any kind of background and education and provenance and vision. But I had a feeling the cinema is a safe place as well, and I had it with your film, because I'm not hooked into a seduction system, which is a plot with a narration, but I'm floating in front of a event, literally. And the first time we spoke about cinema, you mentioned the experience you had with porno cinema when you were a teenager, and how porno cinema was formative for you to think about time.
I was really young. I don't go to porno. No, because it was a permanent cinema.
Yes, the permanent cinema.
Yeah, you will go.
Say something about that.
With kids at a bad childhood. So I will go to with friends to sneak in. Not long ago, I was not born in 1925, but and we'll go and see a huge penis, and but not on the point. The point was that it was called Cinéma Permanent. Yeah. That was the name of the porn cinema, and I kind of liked that idea. A beautiful idea, permanent cinema. So the film, we have obviously there's no story, and so it will be endless, and there will be no. There will be eventually the end of the film, but then another one will come, and you can stay the time you want in it. Time to come.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this permanent cinema idea because we are still there, and one of the beginning of our conversation was about also credits and how interesting it is that you are so into credits and against the idea of finishing something, right? And really struggling, or actually as a purpose, deciding not to finish, but reworking on something you've done previously. Another beautiful definition, I think, that came up when we were discussing with Edwin and you, the film you made, is this could be a film that is a portrait of a feeling. Mm-hmm. And what does it mean? What do you mean by that?
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Good one. Yeah, I have to think about that. Portrait of a film. That's nice.
So we keep it for the future.
Good headline. Portrait of a film. Yeah, it's a portrait. I like the drifting, but the Zidane with Douglas was the same idea that we had. I was talking about reading. You know, when you read a book, we all know that you get into sort of form of self-hypnosis. So most of the time, when you read, you're not only catching the word in the page, but you also the glyphs that you go through, but you also catch up with things in your head. And so most of the time, when you read, you also drift. It comes together, and we thought at the time with Zidane, like how do we do that? Because you have to be quite, in a way, adventurous to go to this zone where you can look at something and be okay with the fact that sometimes you drift out of it. Okay, because you feel comfortable with it, as you say, safe, and not, or you find yourself, you find a good time with yourself. You know, you're not bored with yourself, And the typical thing is that when you, I used to believe in that, or had that feeling that when you go into a bus or on the back seat when you're a kid, and you see the landscape, you start to look at the landscape. In fact, the landscape doesn't tell you anything, but you drift. It's a way for you, for the movement of those, what is then a long traveling, move your brain, no? And for Zidane, we noticed that some of the screen were really, you bored to death. So okay, that could be problematic. But then we found a way through sound or to navigate with zone where it's okay to look at an hour and a half, for an hour and a half at one face, sweating, and not, and say, okay, you never looked at the face of your lover or your face of your mother for an hour and a half. So it's quite something to present or to ask for this experience. But then when you do so, and especially in the context of cinema, we had a chance to give to kids, who will go to see Zidane because he's a superhero, and be disappointed by at the beginning because they say, shit, it's not like him playing, or in slow motion, the best moment of his career as a football player. But they engaged with it, and they looked at the time differently. So kids will normally never had an access to that kind of like specific form of reading, whatever you call it, reading experience. We then came to us because we did what you like to do in cinema, Q&A things, So kids come to me or to us and to Douglas and say, wow, it's with a T-shirt of Real Madrid, First of all, to see if we can sign the T-shirt, but then after that, saying that they were amazed by look at this face for so long, and that they thought about some stuff in their head, that had some ideas. So it's kind of stunning, So we reverse the process, and because it's non-authoritarian, you start to place your own guideline into something that turns to be then a time code, that on which you hang your own motif or pictures or images, what do you call them?
Edwin was mentioning when introducing flowers, and of course he was referring to one of the works that is part of this journey, and perhaps the first or one of the first work you made. And why did you go for flowers as the element that will appear throughout the film so often?
I decided to go for, in fact, it's the only film that I shot was really meant to be to take different meanings according to the different way it will be shown. I shot that at the art school in '88, and I shot it because we received a new Sony camera. And the Sony camera had a zoom, and the zoom was when you will manipulate the zoom, you will have this strange effect from the first plan to disappear to the second one. It's just kind of like the optic was made that way, so it was kind of strange, and so I was fascinated by that changing of focus, and so I thought I'm going to do that. It looks like or sounds like a really good artwork, kind of long, with no limit board. So I shot for an hour and a half or more, long Betacam tape, and as long as I had tape, I shot. So it was the most boring film ever. And I thought, how am I going to display that? So I thought, I'm going to. There was I didn't have access at the time at any video projector or anything that was like in our school. So I thought on the TV monitor. So I thought maybe I should find a way for the picture to an exhibition form or something, for it. And I sent a picture to the INA, the National Broadcasting Agency in France, and I sent to different TV channels, local and national. and to say you can, because the pictures were nice, they look good, and so you can use it the way you want, free of copyright. You can do anything you want. Just tell me if you broadcast, and I like to record the broadcasting of it. And few channels accept to do it, and my glory was the fact that it was designed to be shown by Canal+, and Canal+ took it and took a few seconds of it, and took it to illustrate whether to the logo, to make the little music that come before a program, which was the weather report at 12 o'clock, and the weather report was sponsored by Interflora. So they put 5 seconds of the picture, there was some jingle, and then Interflora, and then the weather report. And I thought, that's cool. That there was meaningless picture that became meaningful, while just because the fact that we decided to be broadcasted on TV. So that says a lot about the relation we have to pictures.
Talking about somehow that it's dialoguing with this, exactly almost at the opposite, you made a very short film about flowers blossoming, which also appears in No More Reality.
That was also another way to, it was, yes, a minute-long film with different music at the time. And it was a project that I had for an exhibition in Moderna Museet in Stockholm. And I was really, in a way, really honored to be invited to Moderna Museet, because I was a big fan of, I joined the school, the high study of art, with the inventor, the creator of Moderna Museet, Pontus Hultén, who was a fantastic museum director. And to be invited to do an exhibition there was kind of like, but I said, I have to do something kind of more avant-garde-ish than just showing something in a museum. So I decided not to show anything in it, because I didn't want to touch it, really. And but I decided to shoot one film, a minute-long film, that will appear in the middle of the commercials before cinema screenings all over in England, Sweden. So it was a campaign, like Coca-Cola campaign, for something that doesn't sell anything. So it was called a dream of something. So you will see it before and after Coca-Cola and whatever, another brand. So the picture was, there was nothing to tell you what it was. But in a way, it was for me to say, it's a field for your mind to wander, surrounded by commercials, a bit like football pitch, when you're commercial around and people play. It was my little green zone of imagination to drift for a minute about a thing that is not for sale, because you don't know what it is. And that's a good word, we should end the lecture.
But then the
I heard the claps at the end.
As usual, if you, maybe some of you happened to see shows of Philippe, or shows of someone else also at the Venice Biennial. I remember in 2009, that film appeared on a painting, on a Rauschenberg painting.
Yeah.
And that was a completely different story.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's again, I do something and then I do something else with the same thing. So it doesn't matter what it is, it's the way they appear that interests me.
And the beginning and the end of the film of No More Reality has like these flickering images. I think everyone is wondering what they are, but they are, again, it's a film that didn't happen.
It's a film that lasts for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And it was shown in Berlin this summer, and people stayed, which is stunning.
Yes.
They were drunk.
At the Babylon Cinema.
But they stayed for a long time.
Yeah.
Some stayed for 3 hours, which are like, what? And the film was, I did that at the Musée Moderne, and I wanted to make a film, a feature film. I want to make a lot of feature films that I never do, which is good because it's in my mind. Good stories to tell. A book that called Montanalogue by a great French poet called René Daumal, who wrote 2 books. One was a great drinking session, I think it's in English, and the other one was Montanalogue. And the book is about the story of somebody who discovers that there is a place on Earth so big, the mass is so huge that we can't see it because the curvature of light, is attracted by it, so it doesn't really go through the realm of visible spectrum. and they decided to go on a journey to look for this mountain. And so you have, and that was written in 1944-3, when René Daumal, a young poet, was obliged to leave Paris and to leave the German, to go to the free zone. No? So he was writing these things about a group of people who decide to go to a journey to look for something which is invisible to see, which is, I think, a great nature of any kind of form of avant-garde, you know. A collectivity of people joining together to see something invisible. I think it's a great definition. I think I want to make a film out of it. So I thought about a few ways to do it, and one way to do it was to actually do the journey, rent a boat and get some people in it and try to find that mountain, which was somewhere in the middle of the Pacific. Somehow not so far from the Bermuda Triangle. And but journey never took place. And what I did in place was, so I have to make a film anyway, was to encode the film in SSE code of in colors and sound. So each time you have a white at the end of one word, and so you have maybe 1,000 of colors in it. And so you actually can see the book entirely by looking at the colors. And the reason why I did that is that at the end of the novel, which is incomplete, he died before finishing it. They actually find a mountain with a group of people, and they decide to, and they found a society of climbers. And the hierarchy around the mountain or the island is made of how high you went to the mountain to climb. And but the mountain is infinite, of course. You know? So you end up with a needle. So the more you go up, the more you start to share the same dream. So people basically are high together, and they never go to the end of the mountain. And the guy died before finishing it, but you know where he's going. It's about like sharing something all together. So I thought it would be a nice way to make a film, so you can sit down in the cinema and like dream about something for 3 hours.
Well, we can stop. We could, as you mentioned, we can continue for hours. But what we managed to do, and that wasn't planned, is to speak about each film in the main film, Normal Reality, which is, I think, a great achievement and a journey in the process that Philippe plays with when or engage really deeply when working and making works of art. So thank you so much, Philippe, for sharing with you this fantastic journey in your mind and in our feelings. And thank you all for being here. And you have still 5 opportunities to see the film. It will never appear again as you see it here. So please try to see it if you didn't see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.